The three gentlemen who are participating are all members of the Center for Israel Education Board, individuals whose advice and guidance we have lived by. Adam Shapiro, Keith Devorcic, and Peter Berg. Adam is the head of school of the Golda Ak Academy in West Orange, New Jersey. He graduated with a master's in Jewish studies from the Jewish Theological Seminary, and prior to that, he was a student at Emory University. And he got infected by the bug of learning about Israel. Adam's a head of school that doesn't just head the school. Adam still frequently teaches a course on modern Israel to seniors at his school. Keith Devorcic is the CEO of the Roth Family JCC of Greater Orlando and the executive director of the Jewish Federation of Greater Orlando. He tells me he's not going to Disneyland real soon, which is a good sign because we want Keith to stay in really good health. He's a native of Gainesville, Florida. Grew up in Harrisburg, graduated outside of Philadelphia, has a BA in accounting from Penn State, and did work in education. He was CEO at the Hillel of the University of Florida for 15 years. And he was also, for 3 years, head of the Federation at Seattle. He comes with a lot of experience in the Jewish world, as Adam does in the classroom. Peter Berg is the senior rabbi of the temple in Atlanta. He's a native of Ocean Township, New Jersey. He's the 5th person to hold the position of senior rabbi at the very prestigious temple in Atlanta. He earned his MA in Hebrew Literature and Rabbinic Ordination from the Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion in New York and Jerusalem, where he was a Steinhardt Fellow. So I'm going to start off by asking Peter, if you would begin for us and answer the question, which I'll ask the three of you. What has distancing done, and what has the impact of distancing had on your respective communities and areas of focus? What impact and what realities are you now confronting as a result? Peter?
Thank you. Thanks, Ken. It's great to be here, everybody, and I'm really honored to have this privilege to sit with you for an hour or so today, and also an honor to be on the board of the CIE, really one of my great honors. What has distancing done? It has done everything. You know, you go to school for 5 years after college to become a rabbi, and nowhere in the curricular material is there a course on how to operate a 1,600 family synagogue with 2 schools from your living room. And that is essentially what's happened. We have learned to run our congregation remotely in very short order. But it's taken an awful, like everybody, taken really an incredible amount of work. None of us are taking much vacation this summer at all. This is the time that's supposed to be quiet, and we're all supposed to be in Israel where we normally would be. But we really have learned to do it. I think the first thing I would point out is that a community still needs to have human contact and interaction, and to be able to reach out to people, even in this distancing time. So the first thing that we tried to do was call every single person in the congregation. So it's 1,600 households, and we called them 3 or 4 times, within the first 3 weeks of everybody being at home. Amidst all of the Zooms and computer, we needed to have one-on-one time with people. We purchased new software for tracking pastoral needs of congregants, and really wanted to make sure we knew where everybody was, what they needed, helped people with medication pickups and drop-offs to the extent that we could. And at the beginning, help people shopping, and also taught older members of the congregation how they could shop online. We also had teens in our congregation reach out and send letters to every single person in the congregation that was over a certain age and anybody that was living alone. And they're now pen pals, so that every single person is receiving constant contact from rabbis, teens, and members of the leadership. Worship, of course, was a big change. We had to learn how to live stream everything. And it went in stages. We started at the beginning live streaming from the sanctuary. And then when everybody was at home, we wanted to model being at home. So this backdrop in sitting in the kids' playroom became the where Friday night services were broadcast. And Shabbat morning, we have tons of equipment in here. But what's been interesting is we've been able to make the service, the worship, the tefillah feel participatory. And we do that in a few different ways. Before we recite a Misha Berach L'cholim, we take the opportunity to allow people to type in names and we share them. The same is true before the Kaddish Yatom. Instead of, we'll read the congregational list, but allow people to participate back and forth. Our emeritus rabbi, who's not able, is able to participate from his home, which makes the service, we can have a conversation. So that's been important as well. And we can even broadcast a baby naming or something as part of the service. We rescheduled 30 B'nai Mitzvah, 20 weddings right away. And that's been probably the most difficult challenge, to learn how to do a funeral interactive, or to have the rabbi not at the bris, but participating via Zoom. We've learned to open up our 2 schools for distance learning. And really, again, tried to figure out what is it that people want. They want to see their rabbis. So we have the rabbis reading stories to each different grade. We're doing programs on race, given all of the challenges in the world, and we're doing it by grade, so that, again, it's an interactive opportunity for every single grade, including preschool and first grade, to sit with their rabbis and to learn. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions on it, but what I can say is that we have learned to adapt, and it's made us better. And perhaps later in the conversation, I can talk about how I believe that we have become a better and stronger community from what we've learned.
Adam, why don't you have a go at the same question, please?
Thanks, Ken. Oh man, it's a real honor to be here. It's very different than that first CIE conference way back in the early 2000s, Ken. I never envisioned we were going to do it on Zoom with everybody in boxes here, but it's really special to be here with everybody. And while I know many of the names across the screen, I do have to. I think it's really important when you see your teachers on here that you recognize them, and to see Rabbi Yandorf on one of these boxes here, who was one of my great teachers at Akiva Hebrew Academy and right outside of Philly is awesome. So representing that Akiva and Barak world there. Anyway, so what has life been like since March 12th at about 11 a.m. when I sent an email to our entire community pre-K through 12th grade that we were all going home for a couple of weeks. As I look back, I still kind of wish that it was only a couple of weeks, and it's hard to believe that it's 3 months later. And as Rabbi Berg said, everything is different, and so like many on this call, who I'm sure are in classrooms all over the country, all over the world, teachers were forced to be even greater superheroes than they already are. And in our school, within about 48 hours, we had fully shifted to a remote institution for all of our students. As I said, pre-K through 12th grade. And obviously it looked a little different for our 4-year-olds than it did for our 18-year-olds. But it gave us the opportunity to maintain a sense of normalcy in the lives of our students, while also getting better at it along the way. Our teachers were forced to think differently, think more creatively, figure out how to do things when students might not have materials in their hands, when parents are trying to juggle jobs, and of course the bottom line of all of it, that I've probably said about 1 million times since that day in March. None of us want to be doing this, and none of us were built to be doing this. None of us were built to be working from home as parents or caregivers while our kids are sitting in the next room trying to learn. But the resiliency and the grit and the determination of our community is what has shined through most for me. And to say that everyone has shined is sort of an understatement there. One of the big things, as most of you know, teenagers love hashtags on social media and everything else. But for us, we really took to heart the idea of physically distanced but socially connected. And in these last few months, I have seen that our community has actually been drawn together in ways that we never could have imagined. We've had some of the most joyous Havdalah celebrations and Kabbalat Shabbat services. We were able to turn all of our annual milestone events for our students into these incredible virtual gatherings that actually, from a positive side, brought in family and friends from all over the planet that we might not otherwise be able to bring in at 8:30 on a Wednesday morning to our campuses. So, like I said, as Rabbi Berg said, it's caused us to think differently, and I think caused us to think better in some ways. And education is not one of these. Education doesn't change rapidly. That's not something that educators or education has ever been really accused of. And over these last months, the way that our school and many, many other schools have changed has been really outstanding to see. And I do believe it will impact the world of education for a very long time to come. But I'm happy to talk more in the upcoming questions. Again, thanks so much for having me.
I'd like to get back to both of you again. When you talk about the realities changing, but you've also talked about how you have sustained and maintained the core of what brings both of you to your professions and what allows you both to deliver what you consider to be the continuity of what your jobs are about. But we'll get back to that. Let's get a word in from my good friend Keith Devorcic, who's in Orlando. Keith, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. And I want to start just by reiterating what Peter and Adam both said. I think that they were right on, not just for synagogues and schools, but for community at large. I think that the biggest thing really has been the breakdown of the walls within the community, the breakdown of the silos. We've really seen an opportunity for a lot of partnership, for a lot of working together. There hasn't been the same type of territorialism that has existed before, as everyone's scattered all over and everybody's trying to figure out what do we do and how do we do it? What do these people need? How do we make those phone calls to all the people to check in on them and see how they're doing? And how do we maximize the work that others are doing, not trying to replicate or trying to take it over? We've seen a lot of different partnerships. The Federation, working with Jewish Family Service here, realized that the food bank does a wonderful job for people who can get to the food bank, but there's lots of people who no longer could get to the food bank because they needed to stay at home. How do they access food? And so we partnered to deliver food to their homes from the food bank. And for those who needed different types of food than what the food bank offered, we created a program to be able to order food from grocery stores and have it delivered to them for those who have needs. And there's a lot of times when it comes to financial need, you have to prove some sort of need. Nobody needed to prove any sort of need. It really was, if you ask, you get, period. And so we really got to see a lot of the best of the community as a result. The other thing that's been really fascinating from a community point of view, the first is that having lived in Seattle and here in Orlando, geography plays a huge role, and traffic patterns play a huge role, and the ability to actually get places for a program is a huge deal. For some of our older members of the community, driving at night becomes a real problem. So they might be willing to drive to an event, but they're not going to be able to drive home, so they don't come. Because everything's moved virtually, we're seeing much larger participation in the community because they can participate fully without a 30-minute drive each way or an hour drive, depending on which part of town they live in, which has been fantastic. And as we've really delved into Jewish education, with the starting of the Melton School of Adult Jewish Education, along with different other educational programs. The response has been tremendous throughout the community. The other thing that was really surprising was the change in the definition of community. So when we began, we were really trying to deal with the Central Florida community and how do we provide programs, how do we provide content, how do we provide connections for the Central Florida community. And what we found is that people are looking for content. You know, it's fascinating what happens when they can't make any more TV shows and they can't make movies anymore and there's nothing to watch on TV. And Harry Potter was on again this weekend, and you know, my kids love it. They're older, but they still love it. I can't watch Harry Potter for the 100th time since the middle of March. So what is there to do? And so people have been searching for content. And as people have been searching for content, and as we've been able to provide more and more content, we're finding people participating from all around the state of Florida, from California, from DC. We've had people from Canada, from London, England, all over the place, who are now participating in defining their community based on what they're offered and they want to partake, not necessarily where they live geographically. And I think it'll be really fascinating. And both Peter and Adam talked about, you know, the phenomenon in education is going to continue long after the virus. I think that definition of community is also going to change long after, you know, we've addressed the virus, because people they're no longer hesitant to have online learning. They're no longer hesitant to listen to an author or a speaker or anything like that virtually, rather than getting to see them in person and maybe shake their hand and say 30 seconds worth of words. And as that's changed, I think more and more people are going to begin to look for online content. They're going to look for online communities. And it's going to be a fascinating way to connect and to reach out to people. And I think when we look at things like the Pew study, I think when we look at all the different community studies that are done all around the country, in many ways, this pandemic may end up being part of an answer to the challenges that were highlighted in all these studies. How do people connect? Because people can connect now from their home. And as we begin to talk with some of the synagogues locally, as they're preparing not to be back in the synagogue for the high holidays and how they're going to actually do it and what the ideas look like, they may end up seeing more people actually participating in high holiday services this year, because people who would never come to the synagogue for whatever reason can sit in their home now and actually participate and enjoy the service. You know, I'll stop here and leave more time for questions, but it's a fascinating transformation and change across the community level.
So let me ask a different question. We're talking about delivery of services. All three of you deliver services. You deliver a very important service in terms of our Jewish identity. In delivering services, how are you able, with the pandemic and distance, to also deliver the emotional connection that is part of being Jewish and that is part of being identified with Israel? How can you get to that? Or if you've gotten to it, how have you gotten to it?
I think it's a great question. I think that's the biggest challenge. That the connectedness piece is important. And Ken, I shared this with you. You know, one of the things that is a hallmark of our academic program is that our 12th graders spend their last 3 months of their senior year in Israel. And one of the most difficult things I had to do throughout all of this was to make that decision middle of March to bring all of them home. And obviously, as I said to you, you know, Rabbi Berg said this also, but none of us learned in grad school all these different skills that we had to lean on here. I never knew how to charter an airplane before March 15th of this year. And along with some of my amazing colleagues in the big school world, we worked hard to get our students home. And I think that accomplishment aside of getting them home safely, it did bring up that huge question for us of, with that specifically that Israel experience cut short, how do we maintain that connection in that area? And while we weren't able to do it perfectly, our students were able to continue working with our team in Israel via Zoom. And obviously it's not the same thing as doing the hikes and eating the falafel, but they were able to continue that educational piece in a way that brought meaning to them, and also showed us the importance of really learning from that, of how do we, if the world continues to be like this, how do we continue to create meaning for students? As I said before, obviously with tefillah, and with the learning inside the classroom, there is that connectedness that our teachers and other professionals are able to do. But you know, really that huge challenge for us, and that will continue, we know, into this upcoming year, is how do we maintain that connectedness to the land and the people of Israel in our education? And while our teachers are strong, we know that nothing actually can totally recreate being on the ground in Israel, but we're up for that challenge, and we're continuing to find ways to do that throughout the summer and into the early parts of the school year.
Peter, any suggestions?
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things we did early on was we took a look at our mission and vision statement of the congregation, and we said, this is who we are. This is what's important to us. So how are we going to deliver on our mission and vision in a different way? Now, the delivery format changed dramatically because we're not in the building, we're not in Israel, we're not all those things. But we wanted to make sure we were true to who we are. So if Israel is in our mission and vision, it's critical to us. We have to figure out how it is we're delivering on that. So for example, we were, Ken, talking to you not too long ago about possibly running a course this summer for kids who are sitting home with nothing to do, right? They've just nothing, they're just sitting there, and they want to learn. So we're trying to invent new ways that we can deliver what is true to who we are as a mission and vision. We looked at everything across the board, right? We looked at how do we do a wedding, and it turns out we can make the wedding just as beautiful and just as meaningful in a digital format than we can in person, even though we all prefer to be in person. So I think at the end of the day, it's about looking at who you are as an institution, and then trying to figure out how do we change the delivery while staying true to our values.
Keith?
So I think that there's a couple of things that we've done, both in terms of Israel and then general connectivity, because I think they're similar but different. We actually partnered with a tour guide in Israel who every other week now is doing live tours and streaming it for us, with us, so that people can actually go on the tour as if they were in Israel with a tour guide. And the tour guide takes questions and comments, and we do it twice a day. So she only does it once, but the second time she's on there to talk and answer questions. The first one through Yafo was really incredible, and the response was great. And coming up this week, it'll be with Yerushalayim. It gives people an opportunity to see it, virtually touch it, and be with somebody who's actually there. And then, you know, we're partnering with CIE and with Ken to do a 4-part series beginning at the end of July about Israel, because people want to know, people want to have more information. And in fact, one of the members of our JCRC here asked a bunch of questions about Israel and relationships with the diaspora, and particularly in Orlando. And I said, they're great questions. And guess what? Next month, Professor Ken Stein is going to be doing this series, and here are the topics, and your questions are going to be answered, and you're going to have an opportunity to learn. And there's real excitement about it. So I think you can really do that. We're also doing a cooking series that allows people to cook in their kitchen while they're watching it with other people. So is it the same as being in a room and all baking challah together, or all learning how to cook something together? No. But can you have that connection? Yes. The other part that I think is really important is to remember that you can have those type of connections even in a Zoom type of format, as long as you leave the time in for the kibitzing part of it. So we've moved all of our senior programming to Zoom, and we had to have somebody teach a lot of our seniors how to actually do it, and we had somebody who was willing to go to their homes in masks and gloves and teach them when need be. And we make sure there's lots of time for them to sit and comment on, oh, you look so good. Is your hair new? Oh, let me show you pictures of my grandchild and hold up phones, or that you need to give that time for that human connection. It's very easy when you're in this type of format to be business, 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 and forget to leave that time for the kibitzing, for the storytelling. That if we get too rigid with our format, you lose the connection, you lose that connectivity. And both fortunately and unfortunately, especially as you look at the numbers spiking here in Florida, and here specifically in Orlando, more and more people are willing to meet in person. And when they are, we do our best with social distancing and masks, but just being able to sit in a room with a couple other people, even if you're 6 or 8 feet apart, even if you're all wearing masks, gives you that positive feeling. And so, again, it's not anything I would make mandatory. But there are people who do want to have that type of connection in terms of being physically in the same room. And so if you have a space that you can create that way, it really makes a difference.
What the three of you have summarized is, with leaders, whatever the situation, however adverse it may be, you have to rise up and you have to stay engaged. You can't withdraw and say, oh, well, it'll be different in 2 months or 6 months or 8 months. You have to take hold of your institutions and your organization and the constituents and the target audience that you deal with, and you have to manage them. You have to work with them. You have to encourage them. We have a question in the chat, and I'm going to expand it. The question is, how do you make new people in our communities feel welcome during distancing? And I'm going to add to that, how do you keep people who are marginal from dropping out? What do you do? How do you sustain it? Any particular thoughts or ideas on how it may have worked or can work? I mean, Keith has already talked about taking a segment of his community and focusing on it, the seniors. Any thoughts from any of the three of you?
I think you have to, I would take your statement, Ken, even a step further and say you don't just have to rise up, you have to project ahead. So we said at the outset, how could we, in this horrible time, take advantage of the situation, which is we want to make change, and we can actually accelerate the change based on what's happening. In other words, we wanted to be better at digital media for a long time. So we're trying to take advantage of the fact that now we have no choice. And the equipment that we're buying, we're trying to buy for the long haul, not just to get through the next couple of months, but to get through the next couple of years. I think the question, we've been very lucky. We have not had people leave the congregation during this time, which means that the people in the margins aren't leaving. And I think it's because they've been able to say, well, we're proud of what our congregation is trying to do in this time. They're reaching out to us. They're constantly calling us and saying, we care about you. They're providing programs. We have a program every single day. Every day there is a virtual program at the congregation so that people can feel involved and connected. So they're proud and they feel like we haven't forgotten them. I think the question on the chat is the hardest one. How do we reach out to new people who would ordinarily be shopping for a synagogue at this time? And in all likelihood, that's not what's on anybody's mind. But interestingly, we have had quite a few people join the congregation because of our response, perhaps to COVID-19, but also to all of the issues that are occurring about race. And to see that the congregation is taking a strong position about helping our community think about race in new and different ways, and actually working on issues. We happen to be working on criminal justice reform as our big issues, and if there's time, I can talk about that. But we actually have quite a few new members joining because of those efforts. So I think it's also, again, what are you good at? So if it's seniors, as we heard earlier, and social justice is a core of who we are, it's going to retain people and generate new members as well.
Susie Shalom says in the chat, she makes the realization, makes the statement, our supplemental school is facing a reality that parents would not prefer to drive during rush hour and would love the school to be totally remote.
So that's exactly the example. That's spot on. So people have been asking us, and we've been thinking about doing remote midweek Hebrew. You know, the kids still all come on Sundays, but we couldn't figure out how to do it. We're dragging our feet. Well, guess what? That ship has sailed. Hebrew is now midweek, and if we can ever get it back, I have no idea. But it's in a good way. It's really working. The kids can now be Olympic swimmers and learn Hebrew at the same time.
Adam, let me ask you a question. Since we have a lot of teachers, a lot of educators who are with us, any thoughts on how your teachers have adapted? Any good ideas to pass on to them on what they can do as they consider preparations for the next academic year?
Look, I think there's a lot, and I'm happy to dive into it. I think that number one, the difference, I think, in some ways between the three of us, we all are mission-driven organizations. For us, as a school, being that, to go to that initial question first, as a school, trying to be that normalizing force in the lives of kids. As great as it has been to adjust to Zoom, as great as it has been to still be able to deliver education, those of us that are trying to look at this with some sort of sanity know that, like, the only way we can truly deliver our product is in person, right? Not to say we can't do things remotely, but when it comes to the social emotional well-being of students and teachers and everybody else, we are naturally social creatures. We need to be together. So what do we do with that, right? How do we adjust? Number one, it means that any of my fellow Jerseyites on this call know that I hope I'm not the only one who has just been diving into Governor Murphy's The Road Back plan that came out at 2 p.m. on Friday. It has just been lighting up my dining room table this weekend. I dive into that not only because I just love reading these things, but also because my promise, and I hope that every other school's promise to their community, is so long as there is an actual path, we need to get our people back into school safely so that they can actually learn together, right? So we may put desks 6 feet apart and everybody's wearing masks and all this other stuff, but at the end of it, again, coming back to what was said before, we ground everything in the mission to say that we need to still be able to deliver our educational product to our families. And so long as we can do that safely and properly, we're going to do it, right? So the other questions there about remote versus, in person and some tips and things we've learned, I would say the greatest byproduct of this so far has been that as a school, we had been moving and diving into project-based learning in some really phenomenal ways. Some things moved faster than others, but the beauty of moving to this remote world is that most of our teachers then didn't have a choice anymore as it related to it, and some amazing PBL learning has taken place over the course of this time. Obviously, kids aren't driving to each other's houses and working on projects, but when it comes to actually figuring out different ways to understand if students are actually grasping those concepts, we've all been tested, we've all been pushed on it, and I think that it has essentially made us a better educational institution as a result of this moment in time, and will only make us stronger when we are back together in September, which we better be back together in September, and that is our goal. But I would say the last point is that, even with all that, and I am the world's most positive person when it comes to thinking about it, when it comes to the stresses and the anxiety of this current situation, and the Rabbi touched on it before, right? The biggest challenge for us right now is that usually every summer we're preparing for one school year to start. And in this current climate we're in, we're currently preparing for really what feels like 3 different types of school years ahead. And all the learning and everything that we have taken from these last few months show us that families and our students need consistency. They need that love. They need to know that someone out there actually cares about them. and they want their teachers to reach out. They want their guidance counselors and learning specialists. They need that type of stuff. They need their friends to be able to talk to them. And so those challenges, what has started as crisis education, right? And that was my response to every parent who liked to send me those emails in the middle of March, like, I never wanted to be a homeschool educator. I'm like, you're still not, you're a crisis educator right now. None of us want to be doing this. So don't think too highly of yourself as a teacher. Please let the teachers continue to teach. But how do you support everyone, right? How do you support parents? How do you support students? And that's the biggest driving force behind all of our work this summer.
It seems to me that the three of you have sort of come to the conclusion that you're going to be delivering your services in along two major vehicles or two major arteries. One will be the in-person and one will be the online, and they will be paralleling each other. And I would say that's not dissimilar from a bunch of colleges and universities that are engaged in the same decision. Worried about people in the same room, worried about people not distancing, but at the same token, wanting what it is that they get from education, or they get from their community, or they get from their Yiddishkeit. Do you see this as temporary, or do you see us as continuing down this, I don't want to say this bifurcated path where they overlap, reinforce, but different elements in our community are going to continue to want both?
I think it's here to stay. I think that there are a lot of people in our community who desperately want to be together, and they will be together. They are going to. I see it here all the time. The JCC is open now for preschool and summer camp, and then we have some limited opening in the evenings and weekends as well. And there are people who want to be here no matter what. They don't care. They want to be around people. And then we've got other people who aren't leaving their home until there's a vaccine that's proven, and they're prepared to stay in their home for another year if they have to. And then there's a lot of people in the middle. And it really is going to be figuring out, how do you deliver, and I'm going to call it three things, not two, Ken. There's the platform that's entirely virtual, there's the platform that's entirely in person, and I think that there's going to be a middle ground where the content is provided virtually, but in small groups together in person. And we're already beginning to plan for the school year coming up, where the public schools here in Central Florida are huge. I have a senior in high school. His school is 10th through 12th grade, and there's 3,300 kids in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. Do I want him to go to class, to school with 3,300 other kids in August? Packed classrooms, changing classrooms every 45 minutes? Not particularly. Did he do well with virtual learning in the fourth quarter of the last semester? No. I'm grateful that they made the minimum grade that anybody could get in a class of 50%, because there were some that he just would not even do a single assignment. So how do we create the environment where he can do the virtual learning, but in person with 6 or 8 people in a classroom with somebody who can help with the higher executive functioning needs? How do we make sure that he's getting the guidance that he needs from a teacher in a situation where there is no teacher? So I think we're going to see similar things when it comes to social programs, educational programs. Some will be happy to sit in their home. Some will want to come and be together with the person giving the lecture, and some will want to be in small groups, watching it online. And we have to be prepared to address all three of them.
Peter, Adam, Keith, thank you very much. And you all can see why the Center for Israel Education is in good hands, and it's not mine, it's theirs.